Here's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. Hello again, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. We're joined now in Studio 3 by Governor Charlie Baker for his last Ask the Governor segment. 877-301-8970 to call or text. And in honor of the fact that it's the last, I'm going to attempt to do something I have never done. I'm not going to talk for the whole 60 minutes. Governor, it is really good to see you. How are you? You don't believe that, obviously.
No, I don't.
That's what I figured.
I just noticed something, believe it or not, for the first time.
What is that?
The microphone things are all different colors. Has that always been true?
That has always been true.
And
Since the
I think it was
pandemic.
a pandemic thing, so we could not use other people's microphones. Mine has my name on it. It's pink.
Mine is
Very
blue.
nice. Yes.
And we won't. Oh, you were just in Ireland. Yours
I
is
was,
green.
and mine's
so
green.
there-
That's perfect. Yeah.
In any case, it's good to see you. Really appreciate doing
So,
this.
Governor Baker, there must be a certain bittersweet quality to your last few days. How's it feel?
Bittersweet. That's exactly right. Obviously, Karen Polito and I have really appreciated the time we've been able to spend with the people in Massachusetts for the past 8 years, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. But I think I think both of us believe that it was appropriate not to run again, and I think we're leaving the state better than we found it, which, given the fact there was a pandemic in the middle of it, we think is pretty cool.
How hard was election day?
Well, it's funny. It wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be, and the main reason for that was I spent most of the time up to election day not running. And so the whole fact that, I could actually spend Labor Day weekend with my wife and my daughter instead of spending Labor Day weekend marching in parades and shaking hands and going to barbecues was a big change for me. And I think in some ways the reality of election day had sort of set in before we got there.
I forgot. I know you told us. Who'd you vote for again? I can't remember.
No, I said I wasn't going to say because
Oh,
I
that's
wasn't
what
in
you
the
said.
business of endorsing, except for Anthony.
So,
Right.
by the way, we're going to leave most of this hour, our callers, texters, etc. But something that happened the last couple of days that made her, the Fall River kid, really,
Yeah.
really happy.
Yeah,
Can you talk about
the
South Coast
railroad.
Rail for
Yeah,
a second
tell
there?
us.
Yeah, we had an event at Freetown, which was a new station that was built as part of the Fall River piece of the New Bedford, Fall River, South Coast Rail. And there were a lot of people there who'd literally been working on this thing for 40 years and talked about how they thought they were going to die before it ever happened. And the most interesting presentation of all, I think, was Representative Paul Schmidt, who he's walking up to speak, and he's got a Wall Street Journal sticking out of his pocket. And I looked at him, I said, "What's with the newspaper?" And he said, "Watch." And he gets up there, and he takes the paper out, and he says, 40 years ago or 50 years ago, my father used to get on the train every morning to ride it from Fall River to Boston. And he, like all the other men going to work on the train, would read his newspaper, and he would arrive in Boston refreshed and ready for the day. And I think, and then he talked about the fact that the interstate highway system basically blew all that out. And look, there was just a lot of happiness over the fact that after years and years of false starts and promises and all the rest, this thing is actually for real. And we have bi-level coaches to carry the passengers, and the Fall River piece is almost done. The New Bedford piece will be done sometime next year, and probably next fall they'll start revenue service on South Coast Rail. And those were the only two major cities in Massachusetts within
It's
about
incredible.
50 miles of Boston that didn't have access to public transportation.
It's going to make an absolutely huge difference, I think.
People are already buying property and starting to do things
Yes.
along the routes, which is great.
Yeah, based on the rail.
We ordinarily don't read all the nice things that people say, but it is a special day. I wasn't even aware of this. As a grandparent raising a grandchild, he or she doesn't sign it. I'd like to express my gratitude to the governor for his ongoing support for the Massachusetts Commission for Grandparents Raising Grandchildren. Is that a real deal?
It's a real thing.
It's a wonderful resource for all the grandparents like me that find themselves raising their grandkids. He or she did sign it. Thanks for your service, Pat from Sterling. What's that?
It's actually a fairly there are a number of things where they existed and we just did more with them when we took office, and this was one of those things. It's a network, but it's also a support system, and it comes with all kinds of connections and connectivity to services and support at DCF, and obviously all of the kids who are involved in that program have access to the Wonder Fund and all the stuff that the Wonder Fund makes available.
Well,
to
why don't you,
kids.
by the way, we were going to bring this up later. Why don't you explain to people what the Wonder Fund is, particularly this time of year?
Okay. The Wonder Fund is a 501c3 nonprofit that my wife, Lauren, basically turbocharged into a. The best way I can describe the Wonder Fund is they raise money privately. They have raised enough money to cover their administrative costs, so every dollar they raise literally goes to the kids and families of DCF. And they have, they basically say yes. So if some social worker at DCF knows some kid who's part of DCF who wants karate lessons, they send an email to the Wonder Fund, and the Wonder Fund pays for the karate lessons. If the kid wants a baseball glove, they pay for it. If the kid wants dance class, they pay for it. If the kid wants to go to summer camp, they pay for it. They have, and they've also got discounts with all kinds of organizations like the Museums of Science, the Children's Museum, summer camps, day camps. And the whole point here of the Wonder Fund, and I give my wife enormous credit, Lauren, for doing this, is she wanted to create a program that would give kids and served by DCF and their families and foster families and those kids access to all the stuff that the rest of us take for granted. And like I said, they've raised enough money to cover their admin expenses, so every dollar they raise goes straight to the kids and families who are part of DCF, and they do hundreds of thousands of these every year. And the big thing they do this time of year is they ask the social workers and the foster families to get the things the kids want for Christmas. So 50,000 kids, they know what they want for Christmas, and they then go buy, with a ton of support and help from all kinds of organizations around Massachusetts, 150,000 gifts. And then these kids don't just get some generic sweatshirt or something on Christmas Day, they get 3 of the things they specifically asked for. And you watch, the Lenox Hotel is an amazing partner on this. The Crafts are an incredible partner. They have a lot of wonderful partners who help them. And the toys, most of them, and the gifts ultimately get distributed primarily through the DCF offices. And the DCF social workers love this. It's one of the most positive things they get to do.
When you start your talk radio career, you'll know you're supposed to say, and the website is wonderfundma.org.
.org. Yeah, you're right. That was a total fail.
Total fail. It's fabulous. Susan in the car, you're first with Governor Charlie Baker. Welcome to the show, Susan. Hi.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Hi. Long time, first time.
Thanks.
Governor, I just wanted to thank you so much for doing what I think was a wonderful job. I'm a Democrat and you're a Republican, and I think you are such a great example of what can happen when a person uses their intelligence and common sense to make good decisions. I thought you did a great job with the pandemic, and you were really a source of comfort for me. So I just wanted to wish you well and say thank you.
That is incredibly generous, and I really appreciate it. And you know what? The best part of that was a lot of people who've said they appreciated, the 100 days in a row of press conferences we did early in the pandemic usually then complain about the fact that we cut in on the Price is Right. So I appreciate you not saying that.
Hey, Susan, thank you
Thank
for your
you,
call.
Susan.
There was another moment actually on the show during
Yes,
COVID
there
in
was.
February of 2021. Wasn't the best day. Here's Governor Baker immediately after he entered the studio. We're talking about the vaccine registration site on that particular day. Here is Governor Charlie Baker.
My hair's on fire about the whole thing. I can't even begin to tell you how pissed off I am.
Well, we sort of got the feeling. What'd you say to your staff that day, Governor Baker? We don't know how you deal
pretty
with
much the same thing. I mean, the good news on that is we got it fixed. But that was there's highlights and lowlights that come with the job, and I think and that's where a lot of the growth comes from.
You know something, Governor? You've been the governor for 8 years, but you've been in government for a long time. What do you think people don't get about government that might help them with their frustrations or help them with their aspirations or whatever?
I think one of the things I would say is that there's a lot of people who work. I know less about the federal government, obviously, than I know about state and local government, because state and local is what I've really worked in. There's a lot of people who do a lot of great work. I mean, we just did an event around housing up in Haverhill, where we've done a ton of work with the city of Haverhill and a lot of folks up in the Merrimack Valley around housing production and affordable housing preservation. And that room probably had 300 people in it, and it was, nonprofit providers, housing developers, local officials, all the people who are part of this team, and we were there to talk about literally the billions of dollars and the thousands of units of housing that we've either preserved or built over the course of our term. And I think one of the things that gets missed sometimes is there are a lot of people who do a lot of good work and you just don't see it. And I think that's probably the thing I'm taking away from it, which is how many really talented. I mean, Jennifer Maddox, who's the woman who's the overseer of a lot of the housing stuff at the Department of Housing and Community Development, she's been there for a long time, and she's an ace. And she said how long she'd been there and how much work has been done. And I just think a lot of times the big thing that gets lost is the stuff that does work. We'll never, what's that old line? It's not news when every plane lands safely. There's not a lot of news in a lot of the stuff that people do that works.
Nick and Bourne, you're on with Governor Charlie Baker. Thank you so much for calling. We appreciate it.
Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Good morning, Governor Baker, or afternoon. So I think I just want to preface my question really quickly because it's important to have context on who's asking the question. So I'm a 29-year-old father, veteran, homeowner. I've been voting since I could. And
thanks for your service, by the way, Nick.
yeah, I'm still a reservist in the Navy Reserve.
Good for you.
So my question is, when you think, so people have been calling you America's governor. I don't know how you feel about that, but the fact of the matter is that you have approval across the spectrum, the political spectrum. So my question is, have you thought about a presidential bid for 2024? And then the other part is, if not, how do you think we move forward with unification in this country?
Excellent question.
It's a really good question, Nick.
A lot of texters are asking the same thing.
Okay, well, the answer to the first part of the question is, I can, if my wife is really looking forward to having me around a little more, so I don't think I'll be a candidate in 24 for anything. I will certainly try to be involved in a positive way. I think, Nick, to some extent, I think the voters of this country sent a pretty loud message to the parties on election day. And the message they sent was, I gave a talk at the Kennedy School maybe a week before the election, and I talked a lot about data. And I talked about data that showed that the American public is nowhere near as extreme as its political parties or social media or a lot of what passes for news. And I said that not really knowing that on election day, the American people were going to absolutely 100% validate everything I said. I think what the American people said to their elected representatives on election day was they don't like extremism. They don't like noise. What they want is people to collaborate and work together on the important issues we face and to do it like grown-ups. And that was the message I took from what happened on election day. And I do believe the American people are going to drive the parties and drive the process back to something that looks like what I would describe as practical, reasonable, and collaborative, which is what we've tried to do here in Massachusetts. And I'm very proud of what they did on that Tuesday.
Nick, thanks for the call. You said, Governor, to Nick, I intend to be involved in a positive way. What does that mean exactly?
I'm not exactly sure at this point. I mean, I've really been...
Are you really not, or are you just deciding not? I mean, I'm seriously not saying, or you really don't know?
I don't know. I really have... I mean, we have spent, and Anisha will back me up on this one, we've been pretty focused on the day job for the better part of the past 6 months, and said we were going to focus on the day job until we were done with it.
Anisha is Anisha Chakrabarty, who's been wonderful to us, I should say, by the way, and helping us.
He's one of those people who helps figure out what I should say when I come see you.
We love that. Let's go to, where do you want to go,
Andrew
Margaret?
in
You pick.
Sudbury, thank you for calling.
Hey, Andrew.
Hi there, Jim and Marjorie. Still love your show. I listen all the time, and I've also called in a couple of times.
What do you mean still? What does that mean?
He's listening
Well,
still.
every day. But
Oh, okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Take it away,
Boy, he's touchy, isn't he?
Andrew. Take it away. I'm sorry. I'm emotional today. What can I say?
Governor Baker, I think you have done an incredible job. I am an independent, which means I almost always vote Democratic. But I voted Republican twice, actually 3 times. I voted for Governor Weld because I thought he was a fabulous governor, and I voted for you each time. The thing I love about you is your personal integrity and your intellectual integrity. And I love the fact that you say what you think and you speak out, in a way that actually puts you at odds with the party you belong to. I think you're one of a dying breed in this way. I think you're a smart Republican. And I think you embody values in the Republican Party that I think everybody in the entire country should listen to because they're dying. And I think you've run the state fabulously. The thing I really, really appreciate is I'm a trial lawyer for 42 years, and I've never seen the governor appoint more better judges in the system than you have over the time you've been governor.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that. We took that process enormously seriously, and I'm very pleased and proud of the people we put on the bench. Thank you for saying that.
Andrew, thank you very much for the call. When he said Weld was a great governor, you said me too. You think Weld was a great governor?
Yeah.
You do? Okay. In any case, Bill from Canton, you're next on Boston Public Radio.
I worked for Weld for all 6 years.
Oh, you
He was
did? That's
governor,
right. Well, I mean,
remember?
everybody's entitled to their opinion. Bill from Canton, you're on Boston Public Radio with Governor Charlie Baker.
Hey, Governor Baker, this is Bill from Canton, and it's Bill Weld, and I appreciate the conversation.
Oh my God, that's so funny. I was like, I thought Browdy liked Weld.
Thank you for calling in,
Baker,
Bill.
I did want to call in and congratulate you on a great run. You got an awful lot done. Although, in my view, you kind of did it the hard way. You worked at it all the time. It would have been so much easier if you'd only had some guy like, for example, Charlie Baker working for you, as I did, to take care of all the financial stuff and the big issues like health care. Next time you want to think about that.
I will keep that one in mind, boss. I really appreciate it.
Before you go away, Governor Weld, how was the young Charlie Baker to work with when he was a mere ute?
Baby Charlie.
What was he like?
Yeah, well, it was kind of effortless on my part. I used to joke that my key didn't work on weekends. It wasn't quite true, but it was almost true. Didn't need to work too much. But I got a question. Stump the band. I got a question for Governor Baker.
Go ahead.
And people used to ask me this in office, and I didn't know the answer. Shame on me. What does Massachusetts mean in the tribal language of the Pequots and the Wampanoags who were around here?
That's a great question.
Great blue.
I thought it meant. It means great something or other. I don't remember.
Blue Hills.
Yeah, but it's
The Blue Hills. Is it the Blue Hills?
People knew the
Blue Hills?
tribes well back in the 1620s. It means Great Hill.
Great
And
Hill.
there's been a lot
Okay.
who live
Yeah.
on that hill in
Right.
Canton and Milton.
In Blue Hills. It's the Blue Hills. Yeah.
And you're a landlord because we live inside the 7,000-acre Great Blue Hill
Reservation.
wildlife
Yeah,
refuge
which
with
is a
all the
beautiful
beach
place.
right around our house.
Oh no! You better watch
Oh
out.
my
So
gosh.
I got another question for you.
Please,
Governor,
go
and
right ahead.
You'll know the answer to
Yeah.
this one.
Yeah.
What do the call letters WGBH stand for?
Oh, I know this, but I'm not giving it away. Do you know, Governor?
I know Browdy knows it.
You do not know this? Anisha, can you stay out of this, please?
I guess
it's for the
I
governor.
guess it stands for the Great Blue Hills.
Oh,
That
he didn't know.
Yes, correct.
Governor, can you host the rest of the show? What other questions do you have for Governor Baker before you go? Because obviously you have nothing to do here. What other questions do you have?
I got a project that both of us can have after Charlie leaves office. It's something that I know he has greatly enjoyed while in office, and now, Governor Baker, you can do it full time, and that's to work on rebuilding the Massachusetts Republican Party.
There you go. All right.
It's doing pretty well. Hey, Governor Weld, it was terrific of you to call in. I have a feeling
Sure
our
was.
guest
Yep.
here appreciates this.
I sure do.
Thanks for having me.
Oh,
Governor
thank
Bill
you very
Weld, we
much
really-
for joining us. That was, of course, Governor Bill Weld, who employed the young Charlie Baker. What
Baby Charlie.
Baby
That's
Charlie.
pretty funny.
You were
You were
head of
A&F,
Administration and Finance, correct?
And Health and Human Services.
Oh,
Health
of
and Human
course.
Services, that's
Governor
right.
Baker, continuing on the final comment made by Governor Weld, I've asked you, I'm not going to ask you today 10,000 times why you're still a Republican. Your answer generally is you want to putting words in your mouth, rebuild the best of the Republican Party. I would say what you're leaving behind, with a couple of exceptions, is the worst of the Republican Party in Massachusetts. The committee is run by Trumpists, the state committee, that sort of thing. Do you have hope that this party in Massachusetts, post-Baker, can reimagine itself?
I'm a big believer that at the end of the day, parties do listen to voters, and voters send messages on election day. And as I said in my previous remarks, the voters of this country sent a big message on election day about what they want and what they don't want. And they sent one here too. And I think it's really important that people hear the voters, because hearing the voters and adjusting to them is the only way you maintain your relevance.
Let's go back to the calls, 877-301-8970.
Michael from Revere, thank you for calling.
Hey, Michael, welcome.
Hey, Jim. Hey, Marjorie. Hey, Governor.
Hey, Michael.
So, Governor, I worked for you at the Health Connector during your whole time there, and I just want to, thank you for, all the support you gave the Health Connector and the turnaround of it, back in 2015. Really appreciate it. Really made our jobs a lot easier. And I also have two questions for you.
Can I just say that the Health Connector was in a fair amount of trouble when we took office, and the people who were there, along with a couple of the people we brought in, did an absolutely magnificent job. I think heading into the pandemic, the Health Connector here in Massachusetts was probably the best operated, best managed one in the country. And you guys, at one point, you had 300 and some thousand people who were getting their insurance through you guys. I think you're sort of in maybe the 250 range now, 250,000. But you guys did a beautiful job, so thank you for that.
Go ahead, Michael.
Well, I think you're right, and I retired from there at the end of June. Got a nice citation from you, which I appreciate. But my two questions are: one, did you score tickets to the Blink-182 reunion tour when it comes to Boston?
The answer is yes.
And number two, what can be done about freaking Ticketmaster?
That's a really good question.
Yeah, Taylor Swift mess.
Michael, thanks for the call.
I don't pretend to understand exactly what's going on here, but I do have a 25-year-old daughter who had a lot to say about the Ticketmaster stuff and Taylor Swift.
Yeah, that was a debacle.
Right.
Governor Baker, I had some dental surgery done this summer, and I came home with a little tiny container of, maybe it was Vicodin, I forget what they are. But I thought, that's you, because it was a tiny container, as opposed to what you used to get when you went to the dentist.
Yeah.
Tell us about the opioid problem in Massachusetts and what you did about it.
So what Marjorie's referencing is back in the day, which wasn't that long ago, you would have walked out the door with like a 60-day or a 30-day supply, which made absolutely no sense, of one of the most powerful and addictive drugs ever invented, which is either OxyContin, Vicodin, or some version thereof, which for all intents and purposes is just another compound in the heroin family. And I think the work that we did with our colleagues in the legislature, the attention we brought to this issue, and with the Medical Society and the Dental Society, we were the first state in the country to put a pretty severe limit on how much you could write of this stuff at any one time, and created a very effective website that made it possible for clinicians to look up the traffic that they were doing in terms of what they were writing, and the traffic that anybody who was looking for a script from them had received previously. And it had a huge impact on the growth in both overdose prescribed, the growth in OxyContin and Vicodin prescribing, but it also sent a message about the necessary need to change the way clinicians treated pain and dealt with this stuff in particular. We also did a lot of other things that ultimately became part of national conversations around opioids, and we made a ton of progress. And the pandemic, honestly, the pandemic was just a huge blow to a lot of that work, because so much of what involves treating people who are dealing with addiction is physical presence. And and the good news is, to the extent there is any, is we did keep track of those people. We stayed in touch with them, and we didn't have quite the loss of connectivity that took place in so many other places around the country. And we did see an increase, sadly, in the number of overdose deaths after that number had gone down for 4 or 5 years in a row. But I think the data this year actually is going to be pretty positive because we're sort of back in business the way we should be. We also increased our spending on this stuff by 5x over our term. It's 5 times. And we created treatment capacity in our Department of Corrections for men and for women that didn't exist previously, so that they could have a path out of addiction while they're in the Department of Corrections. We also put medication-assisted treatment pretty much across the board in there, which hadn't existed previously. And on that one, we partnered pretty heavily with the sheriffs as well. We have a ton of work left to do there, but it's definitely a different dynamic than it was when we took office. And I'm glad you got a very small
Very tiny.
prescription on your
Very
way out the
tiny.
door.
Did you read, by the way, unlike you, who I know you are a huge reader, I'm embarrassed to say I'm not. Did you read Empire of Pain, the Sackler
No,
book?
it's sitting on my desk. There's a bunch of books I want to read when I'm done, and that's one of them. The other thing I haven't done yet, which I'm really bummed about, because I did read Beth Macy's book, is Dope Sick, which was on Apple, I think.
Catherine from Stoneham, you are on with Governor Charlie Baker. Thank you for calling.
Hey, Catherine.
Hi, thanks very much for letting me on. I'm calling because of your mention of Massachusetts, the name of the tribal nation that was here, and pursuant to Columbus, and was wondering whether or not if S2027, which would name the second Monday in October Indigenous Peoples Day, you would sign that if it got passed up to your desk?
Well, it's probably not going to get here between now and the end of the year. They tend not to do that kind of stuff in informal session. I think the way we left that at this point was communities could make the call with respect to how they wanted to handle that day. And some treat it as Indigenous Peoples Day, some treat it as Columbus Day, some treat it through a variety of other celebrations. And I think in some ways that's given everybody an option to pursue what they think is the right way to handle it.
Catherine, thanks. Before we break, I don't know if I asked you this last month, and if I did, my apologies, and your answer can be briefer. You've done a decent number of pardons and commutations in the waning days of your administration. My really superficial research, and I think I'm pretty close to right, is those kinds of things almost always happen at the end of terms of chief executives, I assume because they're so controversial and there's a great potential to have a lot of blowback. Is there some sort of systemic change that could happen that could cause them not to be reserved? Because they're pretty important, it seems to me. I look at the list of those who are the beneficiaries of what you did were really important. How do you do that so that an elected official is not concerned the second year in his or her term that they're going to get savaged if they do the right thing?
I think first of all, just pretty much nobody did any of this for decades in Massachusetts. So I think part of the thing we've tried to do here is to at least put out there the idea that this is a worthy effort. And I think part of the way of measuring whether or not this is something that will happen more going forward is how, the public treats it and the Governor's Council treats it. And so far, the Governor's Council and the public have treated this stuff with what I would describe as the appropriate respect and attention it deserves. And nobody's really sort of turned it into the kind of political engagement that this stuff can oftentimes become, and I think that's important. The big challenge here is always going to be people have to recognize and understand that there are rules and a process, and it should be followed. And the best example I can think of what happens when that doesn't happen. I don't know if you remember I won't remember any of the names here, but at some point within the last 10 or 12 years, somebody was out on parole and they robbed a jewelry store in, I want to say, somewhere on the North Shore, and they shot and killed a police officer. And Governor Patrick did a very intense investigation, concluded that the parole board did not follow any of the rules that were in place with respect to this guy. The guy who they paroled was like 3 times. He'd been arrested for a variety of pretty significant crimes. And the Patrick folks concluded that all of the rules associated with how you're supposed to manage this process were not followed, and they ended up replacing most of the folks on the parole board as a result of that. But the point I'm making here is there are processes here. You're supposed to follow them. If you follow them and they lead to a set of recommendations with regard to decisions, you should take those recommendations seriously and incorporate them into your decision making. But I think an example like that one probably sent a real chill through through almost everybody in public life, that you really have to be careful with this stuff, because if you put somebody who's a really bad actor back out on the street and they do something awful, that's on you. So follow the process, follow the procedures, and make sure they're being used the way they're supposed to be used.
We're talking with Governor Charlie Baker for his last visit with us as the governor on Ask the Governor. You can call him or text him at 877-301-8970. We're going to be right back. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're joined in studio for his final appearance as governor. Charlie Baker for Ask the Governor is kind enough to extend for a few minutes after 1 o'clock, and you can text him or call him at 877-301-8970.
So, Governor Baker, I wanted to ask you, this is like, you are a very emotional guy. I've seen you get teary when you're talking about constituents you visited or difficult stories. And I remember when you ran your first time against Deval Patrick and Tim Cahill. It was a three-way race, actually, for governor. You got
four-way. Jill Stein was in that race, too.
Oh, that's right. Jill Stein. I forgot about Jill Stein. You're right, the Green Party.
My all-time favorite moment in that was, I think Charlie Gibson moderated the last debate, and the question he put to both Tim Cahill and to Jill Stein was, you're a third-party candidate in here. You're going to muck it up for the Democrat because of what happened in Florida, right? When Ralph Nader got just enough votes in Florida to stop Al Gore from beating George W. Bush. And Jill Stein looked at him and just right away snapped, Gore didn't lose Florida. Just like that. Bang! And I remember thinking at the time, wow, that was fast.
Well, she became a perennial candidate for a while. She ran a lot of races.
She ran for president.
But anyway,
She did.
Yeah, you took some flack for being an angry guy. But
I did.
But
You talking about burying the lead.
What?
He's in a debate in our radio studio
In our
at
radio
our
studio.
place. We're talking about education, and you're pounding on the table, and the headline in the Globe the next day was, "Is Baker too angry to be governor?" Do you remember that, Governor Baker?
I do.
Okay, fine.
But you've calmed down.
So, I don't remember if I told you guys this before or not. After the 2010 campaign, I went out and I talked to a lot of people who covered the race. I talked to a lot of the talking heads. I talked to a lot of people, and I talked to a lot of my friends and just said, so what do you think? What went wrong? And it was humiliating and embarrassing and awful to have all these people just, dump on me about all the things I did wrong.
Oh, no.
But one of the big things I heard from a lot of people who I'd worked with in government, who I'd worked with at Harvard Pilgrim and who knew me, was they said, we never saw you. That guy, that wasn't you. And the big thing they said is, you are a positive, optimistic person, and we never saw that during the campaign. And so one of the main reasons Lauren and I decided to take another shot at it was to try to give our friends and former colleagues an opportunity to see somebody they thought resembled the guy they had worked with and knew. And we were okay with losing if that's what happened. And I remember at the end of the second race, we were sitting around talking about it a couple days before the weekend before the election, and she said, what do you think? I said, win or lose, I think we ran the race we wanted to run, so I'm okay with it either way.
Let's go
I'm
to
glad we won,
I'm
but
glad you won. Daryl and Milton, you're on with Governor Charlie Baker. Thanks
Hey
for
there,
calling.
Daryl.
Hi, thank you very much, Jim and Marjorie. Great programming as always.
Thank you.
My wife and I love the show.
Thank you.
And Governor Baker, thank you very much for being positive and optimistic. I love that too. That's helpful in everyday life.
sure is.
And in great leaders. Leadership is really important. Good leaders are really important no matter what field or activity you're in. And I think for mostly, you've been a good leader in this state, and I appreciate that. My question, and I asked the same of former Governor Weld back in 2016. I went to a little fundraiser for him, and actually I voted for him in that race. I don't know if you did. You said you didn't vote for Trump, but at any rate,
Question is,
my question is just what I asked him, and I'm all about being the change. So I'm wondering, as a good leader, if you've adopted driving an EV yet, an electric vehicle, battery vehicle.
That is such an interesting question because I haven't driven a car for 8 years.
that is not true.
Yeah. It is
On the
true.
weekends, you don't drive?
No, I'm not allowed to drive.
Is that really
No.
true?
Well, I am not. The state police do not want me to
Wow.
drive a car, so I haven't driven a car. And in fact, I went and visited a dealership because I don't have a car. Okay, and I gave my car to somebody when after I got elected who needed a car, and something Marjorie, I've been known to do before. You remember?
I
give your car to
remember.
somebody?
I remember.
I think so.
Didn't you drive cross country?
I gave my
Yeah.
car to a guy in Chicago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
But
You can't leave that
How-
hanging.
you
You
gotta
got to come
explain
back
the
to that in a
story.
minute.
Explain the
But
story.
answer Daryl's question first.
So the answer, Daryl, is I went and visited a friend of mine as a dealer, and I said, can I just get in a car and sit in the driver's seat and see what I think? And I did, and honestly, I looked at the dashboard and all the rest, and I got out of the car. I said, I think I know how to start this. I have no idea how to drive it. So I'm going to have to spend some time figuring out how to actually. They've changed a lot since the last time I was in one, and I haven't decided yet what kind of a car I'm going to buy. I would certainly consider buying an EV, but it's going to depend to some extent on a bunch of factors. They're also, at the moment, they're kind of hard to get.
Well,
Yeah, they are.
there's
You'd
somebody
be
who's
wait
almost
list.
as tall as you are,
Yeah.
who yesterday took possession of as Marjorie calls it, a Musk. Some of us call it a Tesla.
Musk.
Did you really get a Tesla?
Yesterday,
Yeah,
yeah.
looks like a spaceship.
It
It's
is
out in the garage. I
unbelievable.
passed it this morning.
And I apologize to everybody. It's hypocritical. I know that. Tell quickly the story.
Yeah,
Tell the
Chicago
Chicago
story. With the car.
There was a story in the New York Times Magazine many years ago about welfare reform. It was written by Jason DeParle, who's a writer and author for the New York Times. And the story was, he wrote a story about welfare reform, and he used 3 families to frame the story, one of whom was a family in Milwaukee. Ken and, what was his wife's name? I'm not going to remember his wife's name, damn it. And the story basically said that they were doing everything they possibly could to make it on their own, and Ken had a terrible life, which I won't get into the details of, but he had a job basically delivering. He was driving his own car and delivering food for this was before Grubhub and Uber Eats and all the rest, but he was basically a delivery guy, and his car was dying, and the story talked about the fact that he didn't have the money, and neither did Jewel, who was his wife, have the money to get a new car. And I was like, well, my car's paid for, and I'm probably about due for a new one. So I wrote, remember, this is a long time ago. This was before the internet, before all that stuff. So I wrote Jason DeParle a letter and said, here's my phone number. I'm interested in giving my car to that guy. And Jason called me, and I talked to him, and then he gave me Ken's phone number, and I called Ken, and I asked him if he wanted my car, and he said, yeah. And so one Friday afternoon, I left work around 4 o'clock. I drove to Toledo. I spent the night in Toledo. The next day, I met Ken in Chicago at Ed DeBevick's, which was a diner in Chicago. We had lunch, and then he drove me in that car to the air. He had gotten a license plate from the state of Wisconsin, which is where he lived. And that was interesting because he went in and said what he was doing, why he needed the license, and they were like, come on. And so I got a call from the Wisconsin RMV at work saying, this guy is here saying you're going to give him his car. I said, that's true. Okay, so when we got to the airport, we got out of the car, took my license plate off it, put his license plate on it, and I hopped on a plane and flew home. And Ken drove that car for 5 years, and he and I still stay in touch.
That's great.
So I want to be clear about something. If you're going to go to CVS on a Saturday morning, you can't do that. You either walk in or somebody's got to take you because it's a security concern.
They are
I
right
presume.
across the street.
Oh, that's good.
Okay.
Okay.
And so,
But
speaking
that's
of
security. That's why they're worried about
yeah,
it. In this
yeah,
day
it's all
and age.
security.
By the way, let me just say, since we were saying good things about one of your colleagues here in Nisha, I don't know them all. A lot of the state cops you've had are
Really
some of
good
the
people.
finest people
Yep.
I have met
Really
in
good people.
government in all the years I've known you. Michael in Arlington, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show. Hi, Michael.
Hi.
Hi.
First, I'd like to thank the governor, not just because he's been such a smart and thinking governor, and listening to you talk on Jim and Marjorie's show, it was very interesting to see how your mind would work. You would really carefully turn the subject over. But my other thank you to you is because years ago, when you were young and Secretary of A&F, you contacted the Chief Justice and asked for me to serve on two different committees in the executive branch. One was procurement reform, and the other one was procuring energy on the open market, which we were the first state to ever do that. And because of that, I got the Caballo Award and the Innovations in Procurement Award. So I really want to thank you for that. Those big things would never have happened to me.
That's
and
great.
because of that, I ended up with Steve Kasich's job.
Oh my God! Did you really?
Yeah. And I always regarded him, after seeing how he ran a committee, I used to call him the herder of cats.
Steve Kadish is, he is really special.
Just amazing.
Yeah.
And
Democrat, by the way.
And so, anyways, that was really great, and what an opportunity.
Hey, Mike, you got to give me your last name so I can tell Steve Kadish, who I talk to all the time, that you and I chatted. Can you give it to the producer?
Yeah,
so
Michael,
I can,
well, that was a great call. We're going to put you on hold and give the information to one of my colleagues, and they'll share it with the governor as soon as we're done. Thank you for the call. It's a pretty great story, I should say.
That procurement thing is, I can tell this story in like a minute, and it's an interesting example of how small things mean big things. The Commonwealth of Mass back then used to buy everything, whether it was $50 worth of pencils or $50,000 worth of computers, using the same process. So we were using a process that was too small for big purchases and crazy complicated for little ones. And so we literally changed, and that was just the way the rules were, and nobody ever changed them. So we basically said, okay, what we're going to do is have a very tight process for small purchases up to a certain amount, where you can basically just go out, get 3 bids, and buy something, because in the grand scheme of things, come on. And then put like a real process in place, a strategic procurement process for big things. And it saved time, and it saved millions of dollars over time. So it was a big win.
Let's take a call. I'm not sure I can read it. I think it's Maura from Cambridge, and if I got it wrong, my apologies. Maura, welcome to the show.
Oh, hey, Jim.
Hey.
I'm a long-time listener, first-time caller.
Oh, thank you very much. We really appreciate this, Maura. Thank you. Appreciate it. What's up?
Well, I have...
I'm sorry. Say that again, please. The governor is inappropriately laughing. Go ahead. What is it?
Well, even though he's laughing at me, I do want to thank him for his incredible service to the Commonwealth.
What'd you like about what he did?
Governor-elect Healey.
Oh, I'm busted.
You're busted. Yeah.
I do have a lot of questions, though.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
maybe he could take you out for a cheeseburger.
Oh, he's been
she can come. She can come by the State House. She can come by the State House anytime she wants. It's basically going to be your home away from home pretty soon. So.
Well, I just want to thank you too, Governor, for how great you and your teams have been throughout this transition. And there's an awful lot of work, and there's an awful lot of work to get done. And your teams have just been tremendous, and you've been tremendous in setting the tone for that. So I am grateful, very, very grateful.
Well, I certainly look forward to you and Lieutenant Governor-elect Driscoll climbing aboard and taking over the show. It will be, I promise you, it will be one of the most maddening and amazing professional experiences you'll ever have. So, and I really appreciate the attitude and the approach that you guys have taken to working with us as well.
Thank you for that. Can you do me one favor, though?
Oh boy, yeah. What is that?
Well, I'm cleaning up my office. You're cleaning out yours. The stuff that's really up on the high shelf. Is there like a ladder?
I will. Yeah, I will. You have opened the door on that one. And I will absolutely respond appropriately. You can count on it.
Hey, can you remind me of something, Governor-elect Healey or Attorney General Healey, or when you were both elected, obviously in the same election cycle, I assume people know that. Did you two not play basketball? Because obviously there's a.
We did.
And how did that go? Well,
She
Governor,
won.
she did she really?
Yeah, you knew the answer to that, Tim. That's why you asked.
It was a draw, and it was fun. And good thing, I think we managed to do some decent work for folks over the last 8 years, basketball aside.
I agree with that too, especially around the opioid stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the teaming up. So.
Hey, in all seriousness, by the way, since Governor Baker just mentioned that, we talked about it briefly. I know one of the many things the two of you do care with equal passion about is the whole opioid crisis. How would you, Governor-elect, how would you, we had from the governor before, how would you describe the progress, if you would call it that, over the last 8 years on both of your fronts?
I think we've made a lot of progress. There's always work to be done, and I think the governor's spoken personally about his experiences listening to so many families. I shared in some of those experiences, and I think it is what fueled us and drove us every day. I appreciate the governor's willingness to spend so much time out and about publicly and also privately with folks, with families, and I think it really helps to make people more comfortable and to deal with stigma. So important. So obviously, I'm going to look to make sure that we're making the investments to address issues of mental health and substance use disorder, but I just really appreciate the leadership by Governor Baker, the Lieutenant Governor, Secretary Sutters, and teams across the administration who worked really hard on that. So, thank you. And I'm going to give the governor back his time. I just wanted to. I never had an opportunity to call him before, and I'll follow up later for.
Okay. Yeah. That thing about the shelves, that is a home run. Oh man.
Hey, Governor-elect, we can't thank you enough for giving us a couple of minutes of your time and calling in. Good luck, and we hope to be spending some time with you very soon.
Spending lots of time with these guys. I'll be happy to talk to you about that.
Over a cheeseburger.
Take care.
Thank
we really
you
appreciate
very
it.
much,
Maura
Attorney General,
Healey.
Governor-elect Maura Healey for
Cambridge.
calling in. Yeah,
from Cambridge,
we very
right.
much appreciate that. You moved out of the big office though, so you moved into a little side office. How come you did that?
Because the big office is very ceremonial, and it my opinion, it doesn't lend itself to piles of paper, a whiteboard, and I mean, Anisha's been in my office. She can tell you it looks pretty well worn, I think is the way I would describe it. And it's perfect for, bill signings and out of town visitors and important meetings and leadership meetings and, stuff like that. But I just walked into it and thought, first of all, you could never put a whiteboard in there.
Yeah.
And I use the whiteboard a lot, and I'm a piler. I'm not a filer. So I have lots of piles. I know what's in them, but they're so I just said my office needs to look a little messy, and this thing shouldn't look that way.
So you can be messy in a more private kind
Exactly.
of way. Okay. Christina from Worcester, you're on with Governor Charlie Baker.
Hi, Governor Baker. This is Christina from Worcester, and I have to say thank you so much for serving the 8 years and doing so much for the entire Commonwealth as well as Central Massachusetts, where I'm from, and Lieutenant Governor Polito as well. But one of the things that really stands out in your tenure was when you were one of the first governors, it was the end of February, and announced at the onset of the pandemic that you were going to implement Partners in Health contact tracing and case investigation program. And because of that, we had contained vaccinations being...
Hey, can you do me a favor, Christina? Christina, I think you have call waiting or something. Could you repeat the last sentence? We lost it, if you don't mind, please.
Sure. So you implemented the Partners in Health contact tracing and case investigation program, and because of that, our state was probably one of the healthiest states in the United States, and we helped contain that. And I was actually on the Boston team managing over 200 contact tracers and case investigators because of this program, and I commend you for it. And I commend what you did unknowingly. None of us knew anything at the time that this was the right move to make.
Thank you. And thank you, by the way, for serving as part of that team. That organization, which we stood up in about 2 weeks, connected with and stayed in touch with 1 million different contacts over the course of the pandemic. And for folks who were struggling with how to figure out how to manage infections within, small homes and stuff like that, it was incredibly valuable. And there were a lot of folks who used to call their caseworker a lot of times, not just for conversations about COVID directly, but for conversations about all of the other ancillary issues that came with COVID as well. And I mean, she thanked us for the work in Central Mass. She should know that not a day goes by when the Lieutenant Governor, Karen Polito, doesn't make absolutely clear to all of us that Central Mass is the center of the universe. So,
Hey, Governor Baker, thank you very much, Christina. Thank you very much for the call. Governor Baker, I wanted to ask you about something you just did a few days ago. Went up to Ashfield and met with the members of the select board there and some other people in town. Why were you up there? What was going on?
we were celebrating the fact that we finally lit up the 53 communities in Western Mass that didn't have broadband service when we took office. And that was an incredibly complicated project because, I mean, at the end of the day, we probably we probably dug more holes and put more telephone poles in those communities than there are people. And it was literally thousands and thousands of poles and thousands of miles of cable and fiber. But, 46 of them are completely lit up. The other 7 are partially lit up and will be fully lit up shortly. And a lot of them were lit up by the time the pandemic started, which was incredibly important to their ability to do anything. And if I have a minute here.
Oh, you do?
There were a bunch of people who spoke, but one guy who spoke, he said he was a computational mathematician, I think, who was from San Francisco. And he worked for a biotech company out there, and his wife was from here. And they moved back to Massachusetts, to Ashfield, which is where this event was held in Western Mass. And he got a job at UMass Amherst teaching there. And they didn't have broadband or really any access to high-speed internet of any kind at home, but it didn't really matter because he had it at the office. They had 2 kids who were 2 and 4 when his wife was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she passed away. And he couldn't work at UMass Amherst anymore because he had a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old that he needed to raise, and he had a terribly difficult time getting the right kind of job because he couldn't work from home. And he got very involved in it, and he said it was a very tough slog, and years and years went by, and he started to believe that his kids would graduate from high school without broadband ever being available in Western Mass. And he said, and then when my daughter was in 12th grade and my other daughter was in 10th grade, you guys finally connected us. And he now, the killer on this was he now has a job. He's running a team that's doing stage 3 clinical trials for a pharmaceutical life science company that's headquartered in San Francisco but has an office in Kendall Square.
Wow.
But he works from home and leads this team because he has broadband, and the drug they are working on is a cure for breast cancer.
Oh my God.
So the stories people tell about how this has changed their life, I mean, those of us in Eastern Mass who have broadband can't even begin to understand what it's like not to. People talked about the fact that they had to go downtown just to have their phone update so they would know what was actually, the latest thing that had showed up on it. And I mean, it's like running water and electricity at this point. And the best part about having gotten this thing done, in addition to having all these people tell these amazing stories about the work that everybody did together to make this happen, was we now get to spend the federal money we're going to get, which is supposed to be for digital equity and digital literacy. We get to spend it on that, which makes it a strategic investment in particular areas to support particular communities and particular populations, because we've already done the piece associated with creating the infrastructure around the Commonwealth. And it's a big thing. And to those people, you could just tell how big it really was when they talked about it.
We're talking to Governor Charlie Baker, final few minutes of his final Ask the Governor with us here. Guy in Boston, you're on with Charlie Baker. Welcome to the show. Thank you for calling.
Jim and Marjorie and Governor Baker. I just want, I sing with the Boston Gay Men's Chorus, and I just wanted to thank Governor Baker for inviting us to sing at his first inauguration, and then again afterwards at the tree lighting ceremony where he greeted all of us as we came off stage and was very cordial to us. I'd like to thank him for that.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but it depends upon how old you are. My brother, at one point, and his partner sang with the Boston Gay Men's Chorus. My brother Alex is the only member of the family who has like any musical ability at all, and he's got a lot.
So I joined in 2012, and I heard that, but I've never. I think he already had left, but he does come to hear us in the audience, I understand.
He sure does. I've actually been with him a couple times. First of all, you guys are an enormously talented collection of musicians, and we really appreciated your willingness to do it, and your repertoire is incredibly diverse. You guys can sing practically anything.
Hey, Guy, we really appreciate. I'm sorry. Thank you very much for your call, and your performances are great.
You know, I'm glad a guy called, because Bill Weld and you together, back when people were getting thrown out of their apartments for being gay in Boston and losing their jobs and stuff, you guys were way ahead of the curve on dealing with gay rights in Massachusetts.
I think, one of the great things about working with somebody like Bill Weld, he sort of figures out what he thinks and he stays there. And he's very hard to move. And that, on an issue like that, he had a lot of friends, some of whom ended up serving in our administration, who were gay, and he was not going to budge on that. And it's one of the many lessons I learned from him.
And he appointed Margaret Marshall to the Supreme Court.
He sure did.
Yeah.
Hey, we should have asked this when Governor-elect Healey was here. What's left on your plate that you're disappointed didn't make it to your desk that you're hoping is early on hers?
I hope, well, first of all, the legislature had as part of the economic development bill, there was a bond bill that came with that. Mm-hmm. They couldn't do the bond bill in an informal session because it needs a vote. Remember, it got put off until... Yeah. So if they don't do a bond bill early in the session, we're not going to have the capital authorization to do things like the MassWorks program and a whole bunch of other programs that are important. So that one is hopefully going to get done early. I think, I don't know if they're going to do this housing and sort of support for migrant family piece of legislation we filed. We certainly have the money. We can afford to do it. I think it would be great if they did do it so we could get started on it. That's something, one way or another, they're going to need to do it given what's going on at the border and the number of people we're dealing with here in the Commonwealth. And I guess I think the third thing would be I would sure love them to come back and do those tax cuts. That,
I think they didn't do them, by the way, because they wanted Maura Healey to do them.
You know what? I don't know. I just like to see them happen because I think renters and senior citizens and low-income people in Massachusetts should be treated properly on these issues.
We have a call. Again, my apologies, can't make it the name. Somebody from Dorchester, welcome to the show, calling to talk to Governor Baker. Welcome.
Yeah, I have a lot of complaints to the governor. I'm going to start right now.
Go ahead. Take your time.
Yeah. We've got all day. Yeah, I know you don't. So
there's a lot of things that I needed when I was the mayor of Boston that we didn't get. So right now, I just want to call Governor. I want to thank you publicly on the radio. I know it's your last time on Jim Browdy and Marjorie. It's devastated.
I know how much you miss this program. You've told me that on numerous occasions.
It's awful that I can't come on there once a month and get grilled by Jim and ask me who I'm voting for the governor of Massachusetts. I want to congratulate you. I missed you. You were at the airport yesterday. But seriously, all seriousness, when I was the mayor and you were the governor, we went through a lot, particularly around COVID.
Yep.
And I want to thank you for all that you've done for this Commonwealth publicly because you're a great governor, you're a good man, good friend, and I miss working with you every day. And as me and the governor said the other day, everyone's going to miss us when we're gone.
I just want to say thank you so much for calling, and I learned a lot from you over the course of our time together, and I really appreciated it. And we got, as you say, a lot of stuff done, which was great.
Secretary Walsh, before you go, who did you vote for governor?
My vote is private. Love you, Charlie Baker. Talk to you later.
Secretary, we really appreciate your time. Marty Walsh, obviously former
I did
mayor.
notice how a lot of these events where there'd be you would be there and Marty Walsh would be there. There was a lot of whispering going on between the two of you. I always noticed that kind of thing. You were having these great conversations, I think.
Thousands and thousands of conversations, and they were all treated appropriately. Every one of them.
Well, that's
It was
good.
great.
So you still have a job and you have to leave,
Yep.
and we wanted to take a minute in all seriousness and thank you. And I think on behalf of everybody who listens for the amount of time you've dedicated to this over the past 8 years, it really matters to us. I know it matters to people in Massachusetts that they've had an opportunity here monthly to call you, to listen to your thoughts, your positions on issues. So in true seriousness, it means a lot to us that you've been so wonderful about showing up. So thank you, Governor.
Well,
Baker.
you guys should also know that I hear a lot about this program when I'm on it afterwards. You have a lot of fans, and you got a lot of people who pay attention, which is nice.
Well, we have a little gift.
You do?
Jim put
A
this
parting
together.
gift, we call
Yeah,
it.
Jim put this
A
together.
parting
Parting
gift.
gift.
Yeah, it's nice. It's
Is
a-
Don Pardo going to do that?
For
no
you
one,
younger
no one knows.
people,
No
just
one knows
Google
who
Don
that is.
Pardo,
Yeah, right.
And you know what? I don't know if I told you this before, Governor Baker. But
He's
if I
opening
did,
this as he speaks.
Okay, he's opening this.
Yeah. Do you know what it is? You don't even know what it's called,
Oh
do
my
you?
God!
Do you know what it's called?
It's called the Smug Mug.
Why is it called the Smug Mug, would you guess, Governor Baker? Look at Marjorie's picture, and then look at mine.
No, you
and
guys
see-
both look just about as smug as you can possibly look.
Well, that's the nicest
That's
thing
right.
anyone's ever said to me.
That's right. We're looking very smug.
Actually, it
This
was,
is cool. Where did this come from?
you ever listen to the damn radio station or what? We do pledge.
Yeah, we give them away at Pledge.
And we don't give them away at pledge.
That's right. People get them for $10 a month.
$120. my
I've
friend.
never, I can tell you, I go off and on listening, but I've never been listening when they've been doing the pledge thing.
Yeah, well, that's what we try to entice people to give us money by giving away these pictures of.
So do you hold the
Junior.
thing outside the studio and hope people put money in it?
With my picture, I do, actually. I do. And generally, when I turn it around, we do a lot better. The Marjorie end of it. But in all
Yeah,
seriousness,
we're
it's
going
been
to
a
miss
lot.
you very
You've been
much,
great.
Governor
Yep.
Charlie Baker.
No, I assume you'll be back. I mean,
We have about 1 million people who text us. I couldn't read them all, obviously, saying that the ticket, Liz Cheney, Governor Baker, Larry Hogan, Governor Baker. People want you to write the Republican Party nationwide, and maybe you should think
maybe
about that.
Marty Walsh should vote for it. You never know.
Never know. You
just
never
don't
know. Yeah.
Governor Baker,
Okay.
thank you,
Thanks,
and
guys.
your
Yeah.
staff.
Great to
It's
see you.
been
Hope
great
you have a
to
great
see.
holiday, too.
Thanks.
Thank
Same
you
to
so
you as
much.
well.
We have been talking with Governor
Oh, by
Charlie
the way,
Baker.
Governor Baker is going to be on TV with me next week, next Thursday. Whole show, actually, on Greater Boston.
That's
So
great.
if you don't want another crack, that's it. Next Thursday on Channel 2 at 7 o'clock.
That's sort of you and me, proverbial last hurrah, given how
Maybe.
long we've both been in
That's
and out
right.
of this space.
That's
It may
right.
be.
It's going to be the last hurrah for you, and it's going to be the last hurrah for Jim. He's leaving the television.
I have other
station.
hurrahs, I
Yeah,
think,
he's
don't
got-
I?
he
He
could
may
have
have
a
a
hurrah
hurrah or two.
here.
I got a hurrah or two coming. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you again,
Thanks,
Governor
Governor.
Baker, for all your appearances. We really appreciate
Nisha,
it.
thank you too. Really
That was
appreciate it.
Governor
Thanks
Charlie
so much.
Baker. I'm sorry I didn't get to all the text messages and calls, but we just had too many.